A lot of the behaviors that we exhibit as adults are stuff that we learn from our parents and older people that we have constantly being around. And as adults today, raising children that can resist temptation and delay gratification is a bigger challenge than ever before. And studies are showing that delayed gratification is one of the most effective personal traits of successful people. People who learn how to manage their need to be satisfied in the moment thrive more in their careers, relationships, health, and even with their finances than people who give into it. So, considering this, today on the show, we're talking about strategies to teach your children self control.
Welcome to the Wealth Nation podcast, a podcast for every mother, daughter, grandmother, sister, and wife, and the men who are smart enough to tune in. The Wealth Nation podcast brings you all you need to know about investments, business, property investments, personal finance, and all-around financial wellness. Here is your host, Yolanda Rose.
Thank you for joining me today on episode 48 of the Wealth Nation podcast. I am Yolanda Rose, wealth coach and financial advisor. And every week, I provide you with tips and strategies that you can use to manage your money well and build generational wealth. If it's your first time joining in, thanks for joining us. Thanks for choosing us. And please subscribe to the show on whichever platform that you are listening on. And if you're a long-time listener, please leave me a review, specifically on Apple Podcasts or on Facebook, on our Financially Fabulous Females page. Give me a feedback. Let me know what you think about the content that we put out every week on the show. If you want to reach out to me, my email address is yolanda@financiallyfabulousfemales.com. And also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, a couple more that don't really come to mind right now. YouTube. Yeah, we're on YouTube as well. So follow us on social media. Interact with us. We'd like to hear from you. What would you like on the show? So reach out and let us know. The Wealth Nation podcast is sponsored by Audible. Audible is a seller and producer of spoken audio entertainment, information, and educational programming on the internet. Audible sells digital audiobooks, radio and TV programs, and audio versions of magazines and newspapers. For a 30-day free trial of Audible, go to www.financiallyfabulousfemales.com/audible. Financial literacy in South Africa is at horrific levels, and we find that academic research has shown that within the South African population as a whole, there are segments that are particularly vulnerable when it comes to financial literacy. And we find women and youth and rural communities more affected with lower levels of financial literacy. And that's one of the reasons for the trainings that I put out, my live trainings, my video trainings, and this podcast as well, is to try and reach out to the female community to upscale their financial skills, and if possible, the rural community as well. Maybe language is a barrier. But hey, if you want to translate these podcasts into your native language, reach out to me. I would love for this content to impact as many people as possible. And it would be sad to know that language is a barrier that's stopping people from actually learning about financial literacy. And that being said, financial literacy, our behavior comes from what we learn. And if you're in a household or grew up in a household that didn't exhibit positive money skills, you've learned those bad money skills. And what happens to your children? It's that whole cycle that continues and until somebody steps out and breaks that cycle. In 1970, a psychologist named Walter Mischel placed a treat in front of children and offered them a choice. They could either enjoy the treat now or wait for a brief period of time, and if they do wait, they will get 2 snacks. So when the experimenter left the room, many of the kids immediately ate the treat, which was a marshmallow. So they call this the marshmallow experiment. But a portion of the kids were able to put off the urge to enjoy the treat now and wait for the reward of getting 2 treats later on. So what Michelle discovered was that kids were able to delay gratification had a number of advantages later on over kids who simply could not resist. And children who had waited for their treat performed better academically than kids who ate the treat right away. So those who delayed their gratification also displayed fewer behavioral problems and later had much higher SAT scores, and the SATs are the United States University entrance exam. So we find that delaying gratification has an impact in all other aspects of our lives as well. In a follow up experiment, Michelle found that using a number of distraction techniques helped children delay gratification more effectively. And such techniques included singing songs and thinking about something else or even covering their eyes. So we find delayed gratification isn't always so cut and dry in the real world. However, while children in Michelle's study had the promise of a secondary reward for waiting for a short period of time, everyday scenarios don't really play out that way. And the guarantees of receiving something bigger and greater for waiting are not always there. So if you give up that brownie, you might still not lose weight. And if you skip a social event to study, you might still even do poorly in the exam. So although the experiment is plainly cut and dry, it's only marshmallows and kids that they're experimenting with, there is value to delayed gratification. Raising financially savvy children involves teaching them a variety of aspects, from budgeting to planning to earning and saving. Besides giving them an understanding of the value of a rand, teaching children about their fiscal responsibility helps prepare them for the real world. Financial literacy is a vital skill, and it is never too early to teach kids about money. Many parents wonder how they can teach their kids about money and where to find age-appropriate resources. You can now download my free financial literacy lessons for kids, particularly primary school kids, at www.financiallyfabulousfemales.com/finance for kids. This ebook provides you with sample lessons, activities, lesson plans, discussion points, and quizzes that you can use to test your kids' knowledge on the financial literacy program that I've put in place for your kids.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Tuned In. Now back to the show.
In a recent take on the marshmallow experiment, a cognitive scientist, a behavioral scientist, a student, Celeste Kidd of the University of Rochester in New York, took a closer look at the issue of trust when it comes to delayed gratification. So in the experiment, which was basically the same as the original marshmallow test. However, with Celeste, she first offered kids some art supplies and said, if you don't use all these supplies, we're going to give you more supplies in the end. And there were two control groups, one who received the supplies and one didn't receive the supplies. So after the waiting period was over, one group were told, sorry, we can't give you any. We made a mistake. We don't have any. So the second round of experiments were done on both these groups of kids, where they were given stickers and said that if you don't use these stickers now, you'll get more stickers in a little while. And we find that the control group, the one that were withheld from the art supplies, had no incentive to actually keep the stickers and wait for any amount of time because their trust had been broken. Whereas the group that had received the art supplies were very eager to wait, knowing that their behavior will be rewarded after some time. The benefits of delayed gratification in wealth building are enormous, and being able to delay gratification is a skill that you have to acquire on your road to wealth. So if you never acquire the skill, you will never be able to really acquire true wealth in your lifetime. It is integral because to have wealth, our resources must exceed our needs. Our income must be far greater than the cost we need to live. Without control, our desires and our needs will exceed our resources. So how do you teach kids, especially young kids, how do you really teach them delayed gratification? So according to the original marshmallow experiment scientist, Walter Mischel, he says that the cognitive and the emotional skill set is teachable, particularly in the younger years, preschool years, kindergarten years, and it can definitely be taught in older kids as well, and even as adults. Most of us learn the skill early in life when our parents force us to use it, like if you eat your peas and you'll get ice cream. Those kind of trade-offs are actually lessons in delayed gratification. So instead of eating that cookie now, wait a while and you'll get two. However, some people were not as fortunate to have parents to teach them this, and instead they had to learn to indulge themselves whenever they wanted. And this trait follows them throughout life, unfortunately. But many must later in life deal with the addiction problems. And addiction problems usually are a result of an inability to delay gratification. And we see this with spending habits of South Africans. South Africans live on credit, and it's not like it's basic survival things that are happening on credit. It's cell phones, laptops, cars, flat screen TVs. All of that is going on credit, and there is a lot of people can't even recognize the behavior, their own behavior, in actually acknowledging that they need to delay the gratification to a certain point where those things become affordable and they don't need to use credit. So I want you to join the Financial Literacy for Kids group on Facebook for more strategies on how you can teach your kids delayed gratification. And if you're an adult who is struggling with this, listen on. I'm going to show you some techniques and strategies that you can use to start training yourself. And the key is to recognize that you have a problem with delayed gratification. You've got to have that KFC today. You have to have the latest smartphone as soon as it's released. And that is a problem, especially when you can't afford it and you're taking your money that's there for your needs and financing your wants, and that is a problem with South Africa today. Delaying gratification can be learned later in life. So if you're an adult and you're struggling, there is a way to help you. The way to do it is to build into your life a series of rewards for accomplishment. So when you complete something that needs to be done, reward yourself. And whatever it is, whether you lose 10 kgs and you want to spoil yourself with a massage or a new pair of jeans, create that reward system to ensure that you are forced to delay gratification until the task is complete and not before that. So if you can do this in many areas of your life, you will eventually be able to delay gratification, and the skill will be invaluable on your road to wealth. And how much more important, if we can teach our kids these skills now while they're young, 6, 7 years old, teach them to delay their gratification and let them see the value in delaying gratification to see the reward later in life. They will be financial powerhouses when they are older. You can find problems with delaying gratification in your life by examining your eating habits or your spending habits. If you have trouble in either of these areas, or if you have a number of vices, maybe it's drinking, drugs, cigarettes, and we know South Africans and your cigarettes and your drinks, gosh, it's all over the news, social media. People are taking the government to courts to open up the liquor stores and open up the sale of cigarettes. It is, it is an infringement on our right to drink and smoke. But when it becomes an addiction, where you need that instantaneous gratification, where you're paying a couple of hundred rand during lockdown for a box of cigarettes, hello, it's a problem. So begin by rearranging your life by breaking your habit in the physical areas first. Break the vices you have or limit yourself to indulge in certain amount each day and then stick to that amount. Whether it's spending, whether it's smoking, or whether it's eating, set yourself a goal, stick to the goal and slowly reduce, and then delay your gratification and then reward yourself later. How can you teach these strategies to your kids? If you tell your kids delayed gratification, it's not in their vocabulary. They have no idea what you're talking about. So you as a parent, you need to create this environment where self-control is consistently rewarded. So when this happens, children tend to develop that sense of trust. Your child trusts that you are the parent, you are reliable, and you will do what you say you're going to do. And this was clearly demonstrated in the remake of the marshmallow experiment with Celeste Kidd. When she conducted the experiment, the group of kids that were promised the art supplies got the art supplies. And they were eager to reinforce that delayed gratification again and again and again. And those that didn't have that sense of trust, we find that they had no interest in sacrificing something that they can enjoy now, knowing that the reward most likely won't happen in the future. So creating that environment of trust is essential, and you are the parent, you are the responsible party. You need to create that environment where trust is there for your child, and in small tasks. Let your child trust you in small tasks, reward him in small tasks, and he'll grow into this environment. Create that environment of trust in your home. Also, model self-control for your children. Remember, the behaviors you exhibit now, you probably picked up from your parents. So what example are you setting for your child? And as much as I'm telling you this, I'm telling this to myself as well, because I have young children that are watching my financial behaviors. When they want something, they like, "Mommy, pull out the credit card," and mommy's most of the time, mommy's like, "No way, this is not something that we need to be spending on right now." So first and probably the most powerful models for children are their parents. And we can't just be talking the talk, we need to walk the talk as well. You can also teach children by the use of distractions. Now, one lesson the marshmallow experiment guy Michelle learned from the experiment was that 4-year-olds were successful in waiting for the second marshmallow. They were extremely creative in coming up with ways to distract themselves from the marshmallow that was sitting right in front of them. You can also develop and practice the if then plans. Now, by if then plans, I mean that if your kids do something, then they get a reward. Make if then plans and practice them with children with a specific strategy. So, with children, come up with plan A, plan B, plan C. If this is done, this is plan A, plan B, plan C. If this is not done, this is plan A, plan B, plan C. So, those if then situation, the child has options and they know the consequences of what is coming if they don't follow through with what they have committed to. So try this. This really works. Also teach children to set achievable goals. I can't tell my children to save $1,000. $1,000 for them is a lot of money, and it should be for young children under 10 years old. But tell them to save $100 a month, knowing that they do their chores, they get their money. It's something achievable for them. Remember that our goals need to be smart. And by smart, they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be attainable, they need to be realistic, and they need to be timely. Teach your children to set goals based on the SMART acronym. Now, these suggestions that I've given you, they work for kids of all ages. You just have to change your vocabulary and the scenario for to something that's a little bit age appropriate for the child that you are going to teach. So give definite time frames in a situation where people are not sure when they will receive an expected reward. So what is the role of delayed gratification in finance and financial literacy? Well, delaying gratification is one of the biggest factors for creating wealth. I mean, I can throw a whole bunch of financial terms for you, but if you cannot control or you cannot delay instantaneous gratification, wealth building is just not going to happen. And many studies have shown that those who accumulate wealth tend to be more frugal and live less opulent lifestyles than their peers, even though they can afford it. Therefore, delaying gratification is something integral to financial success, and it's a habit that everyone should try to incorporate in their lives. And we see people like Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he wears the same black shirt every day, or is it a gray shirt? I mean, that's all that's in his wardrobe, you know. There's no fancy brands, no flashy colors, no branded names. Even the big investor, Warren Buffett, he drives an old Cadillac. He lives in the same house that he lived over 30 years ago, the same house raised his family in. I mean, this man could be living, he could possibly buy a whole country or even a couple of small islands, but he's living simple, the same way he did well before he accumulated vast amounts of wealth. And delaying gratification isn't something new. Even back in 300 BC, Aristotle saw that the reason why so many people were unhappy was that they confused pleasure for true happiness. True happiness, according to Aristotle, was about developing habits and surrounding yourself with people who grew your soul. This allows you to move towards your greatest potential. True happiness entails delaying pleasure and putting in the time, the discipline, and the patience it requires to achieve a goal instead of feeling good now. A life of purpose aligned with seeking of true happiness creates real joy, and it keeps your happiness meter pretty steady throughout your life. So that's it for me on this edition of the Wealth Nation podcast. I'll talk to you next week. Don't forget to link up with us on the Financial Literacy for Kids Facebook page. I will be doing a video session on further techniques on delayed gratification and also giving you some additional resources as well. So I'll chat to you inside the group.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to visit our website at www.financiallyfabulousfemales.com and sign up for our free investment masterclass.